Welcome to the Liberty and Democracy Podcast. The Liberty and Democracy Podcast is geared toward those who seek alternative views to leftist corporate, mainstream media. The podcasts shared here are created by a citizen of the United States who was born and raised in a socialist country in Eastern Europe during the 1970s and 1980s. As more and more members of our youth pivot towards Marxism, socialism, and communism in the United States of America and beyond, now, more than ever, it is important to focus on liberty and democracy instead of the alluring Marxist and socialist trends which, as history repeatedly has shown, lead to repressive authoritarian regimes. Let us make it clear. Marxism does not lead to utopia either in the United States of America or anywhere else in the world. Let us question governments, policies, and manufactured social progressivism, and not go along with whatever we are told to agree to. Let us go back to the times when it was okay for us to agree to disagree.
Welcome to the third episode of the Liberty and Democracy Podcast. For the next 22 episodes, we will continue to focus on the ebook titled It's Not Their Money, A Case Against Big Government. In It's Not Their Money, A Case Against Big Government, we explore how big governments often spend a lot of money. But, it's important to remember that this money isn't theirs. It comes from taxpayers like you and me. Governments collect taxes from our earnings, purchases, and properties. Then they use this money to fund public services. This includes things like schools, hospitals, and roads. However, some argue that big governments spend too much. They believe that when the government controls a lot of money, it can lead to wasteful spending. This is because politicians might not always use the money wisely. They might fund projects that don't benefit everyone or are not necessary. Some people think that if government were smaller and spent less, there would be more money left in citizens' pockets. This could potentially boost the economy as people have more to spend or invest. Critics also worry about accountability. When the government handles a large amount of money, it can be hard to track where every dollar goes. This lack of transparency can lead to corruption or misuse of funds. Smaller government advocates argue for reducing the size and scope of government spending. They believe this will lead to more efficient use of resources and give people more control over their own money. Today we continue with the first chapter of It's Not Their Money, A Case Against Big Government. You can read the ebook online as well as interact on this topic with our artificial intelligence chatbot via the ebook page on www.sersea.com.
We're now about to listen to Maestro Cercia's ebook titled, It's Not Their Money, A Case Against Big Government. Chapter 1, The Influence of Big Government on American Citizens. Misuse of Taxpayer Funds. Introduction to the Misuse of Taxpayer Funds segment. As we delve into the heart of the book, I find myself examining the intricate web of government operations and the allocation of taxpayer funds. It is crucial to understand how politicians utilize public funds, as this knowledge opens our eyes to the true nature of big government and the potential for abuse. In this segment, we will uncover the alarming ways in which taxpayer funds are misused, highlighting the negative impact on the American people and our democratic society. Definition of taxpayer funds. Taxpayer funds are the lifeblood of government operations, sourced from the hard-earned money of working citizens. Through various forms of taxation, such as income tax, property tax, and sales tax, the government collects revenue to fund public services and infrastructure. These funds play a vital role in maintaining the smooth functioning of the state, supporting initiatives that benefit society as a whole. However, it is crucial to analyze how these funds are generated and utilized, as the responsible allocation of taxpayer money is fundamental for a thriving democracy. Lack of responsibility in fund allocation. One of the most concerning aspects of the misuse of taxpayer funds is the lack of responsibility demonstrated by politicians. Numerous examples abound of elected officials squandering these funds on unnecessary projects, personal luxuries, or corporate bailouts. This flagrant disregard for the public's hard-earned money not only breaches the trust between citizens and their government but also has serious negative consequences. When taxpayer funds are irresponsibly allocated, essential public services suffer, education systems deteriorate, and basic infrastructure crumbles, leaving the American people to bear the brunt of the repercussions. Inefficiency in fund management. Another aspect of the misuse of taxpayer funds is the inefficient management that plagues government agencies. Instances of waste, mismanagement, and bureaucratic inefficiencies are far too common. Oftentimes, public funds are squandered on unnecessary expenses, excessive bureaucracy, and inefficient processes. This causes taxpayers to shoulder the burden of ever-increasing costs without reaping the benefits they deserve. As a result, the hard-earned money of the American people is frittered away, and the potential for real progress and development is stifled. Corruption and embezzlement of taxpayer funds. Perhaps the most nefarious form of misuse of taxpayer funds is the rampant corruption and embezzlement that we witness. It is disheartening to see politicians, who are entrusted with the responsibility of serving the public interest, betray that trust for personal gain. Scandals involving politicians siphoning off public funds for personal use have shocked the nation. The consequences of such actions are far-reaching, as these ill-gotten gains not only deplete vital resources but also perpetuate the cycle of inequality and erode faith in the democratic institutions that should be safeguarding the welfare of the American people. Political misuse of funds for personal gain. Closely tied to corruption is the political misuse of funds for personal benefit. Instead of channeling taxpayer funds towards projects and programs that would benefit society, some politicians divert these resources for their own enrichment. Whether it is through extravagant vacations, luxurious lifestyles, or even offshore accounts, these politicians shamelessly prioritize personal gain over the welfare of the people they are meant to represent. This misuse of funds not only undermines the integrity of our democratic system but also perpetuates an environment of cronyism and nepotism, where the political elite remains above the law. Lack of transparency in fund usage. Adding insult to injury, the lack of transparency and accountability in how politicians use taxpayer funds further exacerbates the problem. Citizens are left in the dark, unaware of how their hard-earned money is being spent. Without proper oversight and clear reporting mechanisms, politicians can easily manipulate and misappropriate funds without facing any consequences. This lack of transparency erodes trust in government institutions and creates a breeding ground for corruption, as politicians operate with impunity. Negative impact on public services and infrastructure. The consequences of this misuse of taxpayer funds reverberate through every aspect of society. When public funds are squandered or misdirected, the quality and availability of essential public services suffer. Schools struggle to provide adequate education, healthcare systems become strained, and basic infrastructure falls into disrepair. The American people are left to face the consequences of these poor decisions, as they endure crowded classrooms, long wait times for medical treatment, and crumbling roads and bridges. This erosion of public services directly impacts the livelihoods and well-being of everyday citizens, reminding us of the urgent need for responsible fund allocation. Disparity in fund allocation. Furthermore, the allocation of taxpayer funds often perpetuates disparities, both social and economic, within our society. Certain regions and communities receive a disproportionate amount of funds, leaving others neglected and devoid of necessary resources. This unequal distribution deepens the divide between the haves and the have-nots, widening the gap between the privileged and the marginalized. The consequences are profound and far-reaching, entrenching systemic inequalities and hindering social mobility. We must demand a fair and equitable distribution of taxpayer funds, one that uplifts all communities and works towards leveling the playing field. The role of oversight and regulation in preventing misuse. To address the rampant misuse of taxpayer funds, we must prioritize oversight and regulation. Robust mechanisms must be established to monitor the use of public funds, ensuring transparency, accountability, and responsible allocation. Oversight bodies, independent of political interference, should be empowered to investigate potential corruption and enforce consequences for those who betray the public trust. Additionally, comprehensive regulations with clearly defined guidelines on the use of taxpayer funds should be implemented to create a framework that holds politicians to a higher standard. Lack of consequences for misuse of taxpayer funds. One of the most significant problems in addressing the misuse of taxpayer funds is the lack of consequences faced by politicians who engage in such unethical practices. All too often, politicians are allowed to walk away with minimal repercussions, escaping the punishment they deserve. This impunity sends a dangerous message that our elected officials are above the law, eroding trust in our democratic institutions. Stricter penalties and increased accountability measures must be put in place to deter politicians from misusing taxpayer funds and restore faith in our political system. Public outcry and demands for change. As the cases of misuse of taxpayer funds continue to come to light, a growing public outcry reverberates across the nation. Citizens are demanding accountability, transparency, and responsible fund allocation. Grassroots movements, advocacy groups, and concerned citizens are mobilizing to challenge the status quo and demand change. The collective voice of the people has the power to shape policy, hold politicians accountable, and break the cycle of misuse. It is imperative that we, as vigilant citizens, actively participate in these efforts and demand the responsible use of taxpayer funds. International comparisons and best practices. While the misuse of taxpayer funds is a pressing issue in the United States, it is crucial to understand that this problem is not unique to our nation. By examining international examples and best practices, we can learn valuable lessons and seek inspiration for reform. Comparative studies will shed light on successful strategies deployed by other countries to curb corruption, ensure transparency, and promote responsible fund allocation. These insights will equip us with the knowledge and tools needed to address this complex problem. Proposed solutions for responsible fund allocation. The time has come to propose viable solutions to ensure responsible fund allocation. Among the suggested reforms is the establishment of a mechanism to monitor the allocation and expenditure of taxpayer funds, with an emphasis on transparency and accountability. Creating clear guidelines and reporting standards that politicians must adhere to will increase transparency and provide a level of assurance to the public. Additionally, citizen engagement and involvement in the budgeting and allocation process can contribute to responsible fund usage. By actively participating in decision-making processes, citizens can shape the allocation of taxpayer funds to better reflect their needs and priorities. The impact of responsible fund allocation on taxpayers. While the current misuse of taxpayer funds has dire consequences for the American people, the implementation of responsible fund allocation can bring about transformative outcomes. When funds are allocated with the citizens' best interests in mind, essential public services thrive, quality of life improves, and opportunities for upward mobility abound. By channeling taxpayer money into strategic investments that directly benefit the working class, we can create a society that prioritizes the well-being of its citizens and promotes equal opportunities for all. Conclusion to the misuse of taxpayer funds segment. In concluding this segment, I am left with a deep sense of concern for the state of our democracy. The misuse of taxpayer funds, coupled with the lack of responsibility, transparency, and accountability, not only undermines the trust between citizens and their government but also perpetuates systemic inequalities and stifles progress. It is imperative that we, as concerned citizens, remain vigilant and demand accountability from our elected officials. By advocating for responsible fund allocation, we can ensure that taxpayer money is utilized for the greater good of all and that our democratic ideals are safeguarded. In the next segment of this book, we will explore further the dangers of big government and the need for limited government and individual liberties.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Liberty and Democracy Podcast. We aim to share 2 new episodes each week on Mondays and Thursdays. The podcasts shared here are part of www.libertarian.center, as well as the Liberty and Democracy Facebook group and YouTube channel, which you're invited to visit, subscribe to, and participate in.